Hi, so my name's Ramona and I work at the Nature Institute in Godfrey, Illinois. But today I am here at Lewis Clark State Historic Site and I want to talk a little bit about hummingbirds. So we're standing here next to some hummingbird feeders and I'm listening to a whole bunch of hummingbirds hanging out here in these trees. But what attracts hummingbirds? Well, right here you can see, of course, the hummingbird feeders, and they're full of hummingbird food. If you know how to make hummingbird food, that is 4 parts water to 1 part sugar. You don't need the red food dye. They could care less. But what are hummingbirds attracted to in the natural areas? Well, they really love brightly colored flowers. So most hummingbird feeders that you see, they're usually red, right? Well, hummingbirds in the wild, they look for red flowers, orange flowers, sometimes purple and bright pink flowers, and they really love the flowers that have a tube shape to them. Now, if you know what a hummingbird looks like, they have that really long bill, and they have an even longer tongue, so they're able to stick their head into the flower, pull out all of the nectar that they can grab. So they are very, very well adapted to feeding off of those tube flowers. Here at Lewis Clark, we do have multiple prairie plots, and we want to go out and see if we can find some of those flowers that might attract some of these hummingbirds. These flowers that we're going to find out in the natural world are also things that you can plant in your own yard. Here at Lewis Clark, they have a really, really great native plant planting. So lots and lots of different plants. And at the Nature Institute, we love to advocate for planting native. So planting the bee balms and the goldenrods and black-eyed Susans and a lot of flowers that you think of when you're out in a prairie. But you can take those home and they're actually super easy to take care of because they don't need as much water as a lot of other things. So here we've now walked into one of the prairie plots here at Lewis Clark. And right here in front of us, we see some bee balm. Back behind me, you can probably see some rosin weed and some gray-headed coneflower. I'll point those out in just a minute. But let's first talk about this bee balm. Another name for bee balm is wild bergamot, and it has that really nice purple flower. I don't know about you, but I love purple flowers in my own landscaping. And bee balm is a great one to put into your own landscaping. It is a mint, so it's actually a nice smelly plant. I really love the smell of bergamot. But we were talking about with hummingbirds, the tube-shaped flowers. And that's one of the things that bergamot actually has. So you can see each of these flowers is actually a tube. So they're able to stick their beak and their tongue down into that flower, pull out some of the nectar, and use that, of course, to feed themselves. And you can probably tell how tall this bergamot is out here in the prairie. When you put it into your own landscaping at home, you can keep that cut nice and short so it doesn't look quite so straggly and weedy. That's usually the biggest complaint that we hear when people put native plants into their own yards. But like I said, bee balm, bergamot, one of the favorites of a lot of the different pollinators that we have here in Illinois. Some of the other hummingbird favorites are going to be like your cardinal flowers, royal catchfly, a lot of the red flowers that actually bloom earlier in the spring. Right now we are in the heat of summer and we are looking at all of the plants that are very, very well adapted to living in a hot, dry environment. So one of the ones kind of back here behind the bergamot, and this one isn't in full bloom, so it's not as pretty as it will be. This is rosin weed. And rosin weed is in the Silphium family. That doesn't mean a whole lot, but it does mean it has really thick, sandpapery leaves. And those thick, sandpapery leaves help it to hold on to all of the water that it's getting from the ground. And it also keeps insects from eating them. So they are very well adapted here in the prairie to just thrive. And a lot of these plants, they will get to be 6, 7, 8 feet tall. So we're actually looking at a short one right here next to me. And then back behind us, we do have some gray-headed coneflower. So these gray-headed coneflowers, they also tend to be a favorite of home gardeners. They are fairly tall, but they're just really, really pretty. They have the petals that kind of go back on themselves. We have bees that are just busily pollinating these flowers. The bee that's up here actually has full pollen baskets on its back legs. So the pollen that sticks to the hind legs of those bees, and they're going to take that back to the hive, use it to feed the queen, and some of the larvae there in the hive, and of course, grow up to be another worker flying around in the prairie. Here in the prairie, we are just seeing a few of the pollinators that we have here in Illinois. So the bees, butterflies, of course, hummingbirds are a wonderful pollinator. And these are all things that you really would want to attract to your own yard. Not only are they going to pollinate the flowers that are around here, they're also going to pollinate your garden plants. So your tomatoes and your squash and your pumpkins and all sorts of different things that you might be planting for yourself. So the bees love these yellow flowers. They love the purple flowers. Like I said, the hummingbirds, they're going to look for the oranges and the reds and the bright pinks. So anything in those color families, and if it's native, bonus points. They're just going to absolutely love your flowers that are nice and bright, and usually earlier in the spring is when you're going to see those. Thank you for joining us for our hummingbird video. Hopefully, you can take some of these native plants and plant them in your yard and attract those hummingbirds to your own yard. So remember, you can always use hummingbird food. You don't need to turn it red. They really don't care about that. But find some of those plants that you can plant in your yard and attract those pollinators to you. Thanks for watching.